Have you been outside this week? I mean, it's nice. Like, summer came early. It's sunny, it's warm, it's dry, it's... Oh, right, yeah, kind of the perfect ingredients for fires. So what does this all mean as we actually head into summer, especially after the disastrous fire season we had last year?
It's not just a few months out of the year. It's something that we're thinking about nearly all year long.
And speaking of fires, let's talk about what happened last night at the Portland Police Union building, because I know what a lot of you are thinking. Is this the beginning of another unending stretch of violence and riots?
They would say that injustice doesn't merit peace, so they're not interested in peaceful protests.
Here's the story.
All right. I want to get into it tonight. All right, let's talk about it. Let's flush it out tonight. Talk to us. Let us know what you're thinking. Comment on the show. Comment on what I have to say. Use the contact information you see at the bottom of the screen. You can email us at thestory@kgw.com, or you can send us something on Twitter. Use that hashtag, #HeyDan. I'm Dan Haggerty. This is The Story. Let's get started. A symptom of an American crisis. That's how someone described Portland's riots to me today. The crisis, in his opinion, now to paraphrase here, it involves a degrading sense of community, of belonging, a lack of purpose in some people. And perhaps fighting with police every night under the premise that you're fighting on the side of the good guy can fill that void. Now, this is not a groundbreaking analysis. In fact, it's a pretty widely accepted kind of synopsis by people who study extremists and extremist groups. Now, the specific person who I discussed this with today is someone who I've wanted to have on this show for some time now. He's a journalist with OPB named Sergio Olmos. You may recognize him best by his Twitter profile. His coverage of the Portland unrest and the riots over the past year has been, in my opinion, unmatched, and it's helped grow his Twitter following to more than 100,000 people. Now, last night he posted this. He was there when protesters set fire to the police union building, close enough to hear the crackling. And moments later, he posted this, saying a neighbor tries to put out the fire using a garden hose on the Portland Police Association building. And he recorded this moment as well a few nights earlier, when police rushed a crowd and aggressively cleared a street. Now, one of the reasons I really wanted to talk to Sergio and wanted to talk to him for such a long time is because it's something I wanted to ask him I can't quite find a clear answer to on a bunch of the other news shows that I watch, the things that I read. Something that I thought he would probably be able to talk to me about better than most journalists I can think of. I wanted to know, who are these people? Night after night. The ones still fighting with officers and getting tear gassed by ICE and creating chaos in neighborhoods still. And what is it that they want that will make them stop?
With this specific group that we've seen the last two nights, this group is calling for the abolition of police. So they're not interested in reforms or partial defunding. This group, which is a smaller group, right? On Monday, we saw 200 people. Last night, we saw about 75 people. One reason why maybe the general public has a harder time understanding their point of view is, at this point, that group isn't so much interested in kind of convincing the general public, right? So many of those protesters will not give statements to the press. They won't identify themselves at all. They won't hold press conferences or things like that. They're not so much interested in convincing other people. They are interested in direct action. They're interested in immediately changing things.
So they're not interested in talking. They're not interested in compromise. We know society isn't going to abolish police or abolish prisons, so it seems to me that these people are not going to stop. So what does that mean for Portland? As summer kicks in, starting to get warmer, should we prepare for another summer of nightly riots, violence, and vandalism?
The way I think about it is the protest group has gotten smaller, like dramatically smaller, but those that remain are more committed. and are more radical. We haven't seen large groups, 10,000 people. That hasn't happened. And so we should think about it that way. It is a smaller, more committed group. What should we expect with spring and summer? It's hard to tell. I think the last 2 nights indicate that there will be continued protests. And from this, the city's response, it doesn't seem like there has been any different ideas coming out. So it seems kind of like the ball's in protesters' court.
So smaller, more committed groups, fashioned by hundreds of nights of violence. That theory that we were talking about off the top, that this aggression is a symptom of an American crisis, that these people might just be looking for community, looking for belonging. It's certainly a debatable point. It has some validity, but it's debatable. There are a lot of factors to consider. But the fact that these people have found a community is nearly undeniable, and all but certainly strengthening their resolve.
And another thing to know is, like, a year ago at these protests, and I went to almost all of them, like, nobody knew each other, right? There was some people who knew each other from Occupy ICE a while back, but most people were coming to this thing to support Black lives, and some people got radicalized, and some people adopted like more radical positions. And today, they're calling for total abolition of police and don't want to debate it, really. But a year ago, when the protests started, they might have not had that position. And the factors that lead to that aren't just their personal introspection, aren't just their friend group or their the protest community. Some of it has to do with the response of police to these protests. It should be said, historic levels of use of force.
It is a very interesting conundrum if you look at it in a vacuum. So the protesters have unrealistic demands and unwavering enthusiasm for the cause. They won't compromise, and they provoke police to respond by lighting fires and throwing rocks. Then, when officers do respond, they do act, protesters use the aggressive actions that they elicited to further justify their cause and recruit others to join. So, let's maybe take a step out of the vacuum for a moment and ask yourself, is the tear gas clearing the street or filling it?
When I cover protests, yes, there is the bang bang of this specifically happened. A window was broken. A man hits another man. But, underlying all that is kind of the humanity of, why are you out here on a Saturday, either waving a flag or, breaking a window? What brought you here? And if you get beyond the idea of adrenaline rush or anything like that, you kind of see that there's psychological reasons why they have banded together and they find meaning and purpose in doing all this. And I think looking into that helps us all understand and kind of have a better conversation about how we address what they do in public.
Thank you to Sergio for his time today. You can find his latest work on the OPB website or follow him on social media. All right, let's turn to the big story now. It's usually this time of year, April. We're talking about April showers. It's still raining like almost every day, but instead, we're talking about the potential of seeing record-breaking temperatures this week, 80 plus in April. I know a lot of people are enjoying this. It's a little summer preview, but not everyone. I got this interview from Rick and Pat Tawney. You guys are always excited about the hot weather. What is wrong with you? We plant Christmas trees in March. These tree plantations are not irrigated. We depend on March and April rains to get these baby trees off to a good start. We need lots of rain to feed the beautiful green Western Oregon we love. Yeah, a lot of people are in that boat. A lot of people need this rain for their livelihoods. But really, the entire state could use some rain right now, because we're starting to see this happen. This brush fire broke out on Skyline Boulevard this afternoon. It spread from some cars to some trees. Thankfully, it didn't get very far. So this dry stretch of weather right now means that fire danger is coming much earlier than expected. A bunch of burn bans are already in effect, and we still have pretty recent memories, don't we, of the devastation of the horrendous year we had last year with fires. Here's Joe Ranieri with more.
2021 is already proving to be a year like we have never seen before when it comes to wildfires. 2021, maybe now 4 times the number of fires for the average at 85 fires right now for the year. But historically, looking at the month of April, we're right around that 15, 20 fires for the month of April.
Tom Fields is the fire prevention coordinator for the Oregon Department of Forestry. He says that number is the highest he has seen in more than 30 years.
2021, no comparison over the last 30 years. The closest that we can get is 2004 and 2005. We saw between 55 and 60 fires for this time of year. And the good news for those years was it turned out to be very moderate in terms of the fire seasons.
Fields doesn't remember a time when there have been so many burn bans across the state, and especially in the metro area, this early in the year.
We're seeing this everywhere. Usually this time of year, we see most of our problems down in Southern Oregon, but no one is immune to this situation right now. Like you said, burn bans pretty much north of Lane County.
Let's face it, this month so far has been more of a desert instead of what's typically a wet climate this time of year. This month, we've seen under 1/10 of an inch of rain. In a normal April, we should be over 1.25 inches of rain already.
Typically, 10, 15 years ago, they could take care of that themselves. Okay, it creeps away from the pile. I've got my garden hose and I'll just spray it out. But things are so dry that when they do creep out, they take off and they're off to the races, and they need assistance from us. So that's where we come into play.
The Oregon Department of Forestry says wildfires aren't just the ones you see burn out of control in the middle of forest. Even a backyard burn that gets out of control is considered a wildfire.
So there's all kinds of categories, but the most prevalent year in and year out is escaped outdoor debris burns, piles in backyards. For the most part, people should be able to do this safely, but over the last several years, people are getting surprised by the fact that it's so dry.
ODF doesn't start looking to see if fire season is going to be particularly bad or not for another couple of weeks.
We generally follow significant fire potential on the National Fire Danger Rating System beginning May 1st, and maybe we need to change things a little bit now, look at that a little bit earlier.
Fields' advice? To make sure we get through this dry stretch, hold off on any burning, and if you have already started burning in your yard,
piles, they get compact and they can hold heat for several weeks, even months at times. Go back and check those for heat and smoke and make sure that they're completely out.
Make sure to continue to check in on it well after the flames have burned out.
Okay, let's talk to Joe Ranieri for just a moment. Joe, of course, you are a meteorologist, so you see the world a little bit differently than most people. So when you look at things over the next couple of months, what will you be looking at to indicate what type of fire season it might be?
Well, one thing we're going to be paying close attention to is long-range models, and looking at some of the long-range models for the second half of April to see just how much rain we could potentially see. And there is good news. We are going to be seeing some rain for the later part of April. Rainfall amounts could vary. Of course, we're still several days out from starting to move into the later part of the month and starting to see a bit of a cool down. We're also hoping that May and June will bring in some cool and rainy conditions, and there's hopefully a chance to maybe see some showers off and on throughout a good part of the summer. That way we don't start to see our dry conditions get too dry too fast.
Now look, news people and meteorologists, we talk about fire season every single year, but last year was so historic, and I think people have a little bit of PTSD after that. I mean, there are so many communities right now still recovering from those fires, and a lot of people are wondering just how historic was it? Is it something that we could honestly see repeated this year?
There's always that chance, but let's not forget, talking about the historic wildfires from basically Labor Day weekend and throughout the first half of September of 2020, it was very historic, and there was a perfect storm of things. 3 things: hot temperatures, windy conditions, and dry conditions as well. Basically from September 1st and all the way to almost to the mid-month, we didn't see a drop of rain. That was a big problem. The other thing, some of those small fires that started near Detroit Lake, east of Detroit Lake, were smoldering for weeks. And the big problem when those flames started to move all over the place was because the gusts were anywhere from 65 to 70 miles per hour. So hopefully we see more rain heading into the later part of the summer than we did last year.
Got it. So one of those things is bad. You put all 3 together, it creates historic conditions. So hopefully that's something we avoid in this upcoming season. Joe, thank you.
The feds are stepping in and trying to tackle Portland's gun violence problem. But some of you want to know, is this really going to work?
It just will make us better to see the bigger picture of how these guns are moving, how the people who are using them are moving.
And Oregon's favorite elephant, yes, we have a favorite elephant, would have turned 59 today. And we're going to celebrate Packy's birthday with a trip into the KGW Vault when the story continues.
Oh, welcome back. Lots of good comments tonight. People writing in using the hashtag #HeyDan. Can I just address something right off the bat? Look beyond protesters and rioters and whatever terminology we're using. We're beyond that. That discussion was a million years ago. We're talking about root causes and how to end this destruction. I don't think anybody is saying, well, it would be over if the media would use the word rioters instead of protesters when describing people who are rioting and protesting. Let's move on. Got other stuff to talk about, for crying out loud. Use that hashtag #HeyDan if you feel like what I just said is wrong. Now, we got a bunch of questions last night after our big story. And that big story was about the new FBI lead task force that's going to try and help local police departments, mainly Portland's, get a handle on this recent surge in gun violence. It's called the Metro Safe Streets Task Force. Jim saw the story and Jim asked, do you think that a cooperative community would reduce shootings in Portland? If people in the areas impacted by the shootings would communicate with the police by identifying the shooters, the problem may actually be reduced. Jim, thank you for your input, and we'll tell you that city leaders entirely agree with you. They say, yes, you're onto something. They want people to trust and help the police to solve these crimes. That's sort of the main reason why City Council passed this last week.
The $6 million plan.
The $6 million plan, by the way, none of that money is going to police, is going to mostly community groups, specifically the ones already contracted with the city, the ones already working in these neighborhoods that are being hardest hit by this spike in gun violence. And commissioners think that these groups, because of these relationships, can talk to people, can get them to work with the police, and maybe get them to turn in violent people, to turn in the people pulling the trigger, to get the communities to turn away from violence. That being said, again, the feds are getting involved now. And some of the people who do that kind of work in these communities now are worried that people, witnesses, victims, that sort of thing, will clam up because of this news, because they're afraid of getting slapped with bigger federal charges in every case. But don't take my word for it. Take Lionel Irving's word. He spent some time in prison himself for manslaughter. Now he is out. He's running one of those community groups. It's called Love is Stronger, Inc. And here's what he told Maggie Vespa about this new task force.
And for guys like me, I'm really worried because it takes away from my credibility when I come and talk to a young man, because they know what they're up against. They don't want to, when the feds is in play, they don't want to hear what, because they say the police is watching you, Mo. The feds is coming. You got the feds here. They don't want me to come pull up on them because the feds might be with me. And so it makes the job a lot harder. And I'm just really worried about the ramifications of the ripple effect of this for the kids who aren't shooters, because it's only a few shooters. A lot of these kids now got guns because they're scared.
All right. That being said, all right, you got his opinion. A lot of people don't agree with him. They think Irving's wrong there. They say, look, why shouldn't the feds step in? What we are doing locally isn't working. Shootings are happening at a record pace in this city. 300 so far this year. Nearly a third of those left someone injured. 18 of them left someone dead. Again, this is just 2021 alone, and it's the middle of April. 300 shootings. And it's no secret, Portland police, the police force is in horrible shape right now. Between the protests, the massive cuts to the funding that we saw last summer, and now this spike in crime, officers are exhausted, and they're leaving. They're leaving the city. They're leaving the police bureau in droves. More than 100 have retired or flat out quit since last summer. For those who are left, a lot of people don't want to talk to them. Like Jim said in his email, it's not a good time to be a cop. We know that. That in mind, Maggie yesterday also interviewed the Multnomah County DA about why the feds are stepping in now to help here in Portland.
Would this be necessary if that weren't happening, aka if Portland police officers maybe felt more supported and there wasn't this mass exodus happening, and then we weren't kind of low, as low as we are on officers in Portland? Will we need this partnership?
Well, I think that this helps that issue, but the answer is that yes, I think this collaboration still would make sense because we're talking about different agencies with different jurisdictions, different abilities to share information. You know, my understanding is in the agreements between the city and the FBI and the ATF, but my understanding is that this will cover additional overtime costs that the Bureau could run into, also pay for resources like cars and other equipment that they would use in these investigations. And I think even more importantly, what this will do is it'll put different agencies regionally working the same cases together. So that's why I'm supportive of this. You know, we need to get those guns off the streets. People who are willing to shoot up our communities, they need to also have accountability for their actions.
And one last point here, just to wrap this up. For those of you thinking, I mean, wow, Portland is so bad off right now that the feds have to swoop in and take care of our police work. We should note that shootings are rising across the country. It's not just here. Major cities nationwide. That in mind, we asked the FBI's Portland office if the Bureau is forming partnerships in other cities to help quell their shootings as well. Their public affairs rep wrote back and said there are safe streets task forces all over the country. It's a somewhat long-running program. Then she added, I don't have specifics about how other cities are utilizing the SSTFs in regards to gun violence. All right, keep those questions coming. Keep the comments coming. Anything that we covered tonight or something you want to see us cover in the future, just let us know. I'm going to read a few after the break. Use the hashtag HeyDan. We're going to finish the story by digging into the KGW Vault next and remembering Packy. Welcome back. We love digging into the KGW Vault. We check out to see what's down in our archives. If you have something you want us to look for, let us know. Use the hashtag HeyDan. We checked the calendar today, and today would have been Packy the elephant's 59th birthday. You probably already knew that, right? Well, guess what? We found some clips, okay? He was born at the Oregon Zoo. I know a lot of you grew up with Packy. He was born April 14th, 1962. It was a pretty big deal at the time. He was the first Asian elephant born in captivity in North America in 44 years. So it really put the Oregon Zoo in the national spotlight. We found an interview with zoo staff from when Packy's mom was about to give birth.
Well, I've been wrong so many times in humans that I suppose I'm entitled to be wrong in this one experience, my first with these elephants. I would, however, judging from the information we got from London, believe that we're going to anticipate actually demonstrating the beginning of labor, be able to see it, know when it starts, and then follow it, perhaps just by watching the contractions, uterine contractions, and timing them for a matter of several hours after this start. I expect no precipitous thing, but again, please bear in mind I have had no experience whatsoever.
I mean, was that a crazy interview or what? The trunk coming in, the doctor had no idea what was going on. That was incredible. Packy lived 54 years. He died in 2017 after battling tuberculosis. He was the oldest male elephant in North America at the time. Happy birthday, Packy. All right, a couple of comments here talking about the protest coverage. James wrote in a solution and said they need to arrest them. It's a smaller protest. Then charge the convicted and ban them from downtown. They need to do whatever it takes to stop this. They have destroyed that city. Well, here's the thing, James. The DA is not going to do that. He's never going to do that, and he has said as much. He even said as much when he ran for election just prior to all this happening and won by a landslide. So the community weighed in, they picked a DA, and now this is what's happening. We're listening to what he wants to do. People voted him in by a big margin. And then this is just interesting. We cover something like this. Beachy Keene said, "You seem out of touch. The protesters will be satisfied when police stop killing and brutalizing POC, people of color. The protesters aren't violent. The cops are violent. If you bothered to actually see for yourself, you would know." And then Rick sent this in. "Hey, Dan, what a fool you look like," interviewing tonight's guest who says, "Nothing. These protesters are not looking for community or belonging. They're nothing but little thugs who are having fun. And the mayor is a wimp who won't stop it." So which one of you thinks you're exactly right? Because I feel like you both seem pretty sure, and you're both pretty far from each other. Do you think maybe it might be somewhere in between? Possibly? That's it for tonight. Keep reaching out. Let me know what you think. Use that hashtag HateDan. I'll see you tomorrow.